Rust monsters have a special ability not often seen, as they possess a special bacterium that allows them to oxidize metals rapidly at a simple touch of their antennae. This oxidation rusts out many non-magical equipment, turning the gear to dust within a turn or two, and allows the monster, as the name implies, to eat the rust with their long, sticky, frog-like tongues. That, just a moment ago, was your party's precious gear. Now, when you normally look to the stats of these CR1/2 creatures, there isn't much there that's really threatening. In fact, outside of their ability to rust out metals, they really don't pose much of a fight. Doubly so to those who understand what these creatures want and how they go about feeding. So let's take some time to quickly break down some basics of both their stats and their lifestyle, and then we can move on to changing these cute little guys in a way to make them much, much more threatening. So even with them being hungry for basically any metal, they're surprisingly peaceful and quiet creatures when not exposed to the shiny and rustable food. They rarely travel in packs, and hunting for them is more like a very sharp sense of smell that is described like a magnetic pull. The more pure the metal, the stronger the pull, to a certain extent. But when these cute creatures are close to metal, they lose that passive cutesy nature, and instead find themselves in a hunger frenzy, consuming and rusting any nearby metal until it's all gone, gorging themselves and attracting more and more of their kind. One rust monster can easily end up attracting more with both the noise that they make and by sending rust flying everywhere. An important note about its body is that any non-magical item that hits the creature or otherwise comes in contact with the rust monster will rust over and disintegrate into powder over time. Sorry, but that plate mail really isn't safe from this ability either. The reason this is pretty important is that most metals are not safe from this at all, so you can imagine that unless your party's gear is made out of solid platinum or bronze, the rust monster is going to want to eat it, and it probably could. Alongside the stats like a 40-foot walking speed, and its relatively good AC compared to its HP and CR rating, one of these bugs could be a problem for some adventurers starting out, but otherwise, most players at 4th level or higher would find them just annoying and nothing more. Between their low AC when it comes down to it, reckless feeding frenzy, and otherwise simple targeting, which boils down to attacking the person with the most metal on them, they are predictable, frail, and overall just not a massive threat in the grand scheme of potential monsters. So, how to make these guys a bit more difficult and challenging comes down to their greatest feature, which isn't actually their rust ability. In my eyes, it's the sense of smell when it comes to finding these items. Depending on the quantity, quality, and overall size of the object that these guys are smelling, they can be drawn in like moths to the flame from hundreds of feet away, cluttering up dungeon delving and making the players never truly safe. They are patient and otherwise quick when hunting, able to wait out prey for days without sleep or food. It is to be noted that once these cute little guys catch a whiff of real metal meal, they lose all sense of self-preservation. They dive headfirst into combat suddenly and swiftly, going for metal with fervor. This is a very fun way to keep them doing the most wild and awful battle tactics in the middle of an already chaotic situation. So, an example I'd like to pose to you is an underground group of kobolds have set up a base of operations in a mine. The party is sent down there and paid up front in new weapons and gear. Easy enough. They delve into the mines. They find that the combat ahead does have the kobolds, but they're using stone tools, rocks for weapons. In fact, they have some explosives, but outside of that, no metal. And it becomes clear once the heat of the combat actually starts, why this is the case, as the tunnels all around the party are filled with rust monsters who close in on them. The kobolds are safe, they have no metal on them, and the rust monsters descend swiftly onto the party, ignoring the kobolds completely, and going into a frenzy over anybody who has any amount of metal on them, crawling all over them, and trying to eat the delicious and shiny metal toys the party just got. All while the kobolds are pelting them with rocks and slings, the melee fighters are juggling with the kobolds in melee, and they're having to deal with rust monsters who are gunning for their new armor and weapons, all of this gear that they're desperately trying to keep safe. This kind of combat where you have an event that seems like the main threat, that the kobolds are the threat, they've got explosives and they're digging tunnels and they're a problem. That wasn't the main threat the whole time, it was the rust monsters, who technically didn't scare off the miners in the first place, but the kobolds knew about them. Once you have this situation in place, you can pull the rug out from under your party and have the true threat present itself. It's one of my favorite strategies to throw at parties who have a head that's too big for their shoulders. Next, I might suggest using these as trained pets in war, or otherwise just a trained pet in general. A small army of these guys leading a charge against a force, disarming and eating the weapons and armor of the enemy before they even step into the fray, would just make so much work be wasted. Imagine how easy it would be for an army even smaller, half the size, to walk into an army that is missing half of their gear. This is a great way to introduce animal tamers with a little too much time on their hands. But technically, you can't really train the rust monsters once they're in a feeding frenzy. It is suggested, and even implied, that even the 8th level spell Dominate Monster won't work on a rust monster that's in a feeding frenzy. So, I don't know, it's up to you to rule that, but... Although, I will admit that rust monsters do have a pretty glaring weakness, which is, despite their ability to rust out non-magical gear, they can't actually destroy magical gear, which I could see being a reason to never really run them more than once against a party. In fact, you may never run these against a party at all if they're even moderately leveled, much less high leveled. Fixing this isn't as simple as changing the ability either, as being able to destroy magical items at any level is a massive swing for CR ratings. Even for these cute little guys, I don't think you can make an exception like that. Money is just as important as other things in D&D. It plays a part in keeping the players at a certain power level. Kind of like true levels, it keeps the players in a field of which it is easier to balance encounters for. If they have access to rare or legendary magic items at the very beginning of the game, it might make it impossible to balance encounters for the rest of the game. But if you as a dungeon master make it to where these rust monsters can destroy those magical items, you may find yourself in a situation where players are spending days in-game earning the coin necessary to buy magical gear just to rip it away from them next combat. It's kind of against the spirit of the game when you think about it, if you're not careful. This isn't the same to say as basic gear being destroyed is the same as magical gear, because basic gear is replaceable and easily made. Heck, there's features that allow you to make basic gear. It isn't to say that destroying magical gear shouldn't be in the game. No, that's perfectly fine. But you need a steady hand to balance whether or not a small creature like this gets a powerful ability like destroying magical gear. If I were to grant them the ability to corrode magical gear, I would make it some sort of weapon attack. Make the attack have a damage to the weapon. Magical gear in tabletop games, especially Dungeons & Dragons, have HP and AC. If you break the AC of the item, and it does enough damage, it will break the item, if not just damage it. This is important to the players because it gives your intention more highlight. It tells the players that if they don't hide or store their important gear, they could lose it forever. Now, obviously, if these are CR1 creatures, they might not be doing a lot of damage to their magical item, but by establishing that you can destroy their magical gear, they might not just swing it willy-nilly every time they go into a combat. Look, I don't feel like the Rust monster is easy to run in Modern 5th Edition. At least not without using plenty of cheese and making your players really upset. These cute little monsters have a bunch of potential as sneak attackers or otherwise pets or mounts, but I really can't think of another way to how-to Rust monsters. Rust monsters gave me a bit of a difficulty because of everything that is designed around them is really intended for when they were first made, to be a monster that you fight when you can't replace your gear. But who knows? Maybe there's more ways to how-to them. Thanks for sticking around for the video. These are a blast to make, but do take me quite some time to research, to script, record, edit, and post. If you want to hear a how-to on a specific type of monster that feels a bit stale in your own games, let me know. I would love to do one of these that is suggested by you guys. And as always, thanks for watching. Yeah, I'll see you next time. If streaming games, playing D&D, talking about all things nerdy, and even embarrassing myself on live is good enough for you, well, maybe check out my content. And thanks for watching this one. I really appreciate it. If you need to find me, go ahead and look at my links down below, and maybe check out some of my other videos on TikTok and Twitch.